Hi, my name is Paul Stringfellow. I'm a CTO of a UK managed service provider and consultancy firm, as well as a cybersecurity analyst. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I really appreciate the invite to be part of today's event. And thank you for the team for entrusting me to chat with our guest, Andy Greenberg. Andy, for those who wasn't just listening to what Rick covered, Andy is an award-winning author and a senior writer at Wired. His previous books included Sandworm and The Machine Kills Secrets, but his most recent book, and Rick just presented it before and talked effusively about it, as I will in a minute. It's called Traces in the Dark. It's a story of crime and pursuit in the digital age, investigating how Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has changed the criminal landscape. So welcome, Andy. Welcome to the Open Source Security Summit.
Very glad to be here, and thank you for that introduction, Paul. And also thank you to Rick for the book plug. I'm a huge fan of the CyberCanon and Cliff Stoll, of course. We won't talk, of course, about my first book that didn't make the cut for the cybersecurity canon project that he runs, but I'm always a fan of Rick, and I really appreciate what he does to spread the word about books and get people reading.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that didn't affect you at all, Andy, and you've obviously let it go. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Won't talk.
So just so people know what we're going to talk about, we'll talk about your book, Andy, and everybody here at the event today. I think is going to get an opportunity to get a hold of a copy of that, and absolutely recommend that it's worth a read. Actually, as Rick pointed out before. So firstly, Andy, before we kind of jump into the book, I mean, congratulations on it. I read it earlier this year. Absolutely great read. You know, it's a proper true life thriller. It's got organized criminality. It's got agents jetting around the world. It's got covert ops. It's kind of James Bond meets Bitcoin. So for those who are not familiar with the book and the world it inhabits, why not introduce us to Traces in the Dark and kind of the world you discovered and what you've written about?
Yeah, well, if I could say a bit about how I came to write this book, I guess like almost, let's see, like coming up on 2 decades now, have as a reporter covered this world of cybercrime and cyber warfare, surveillance, encryption. But throughout all of those stories that I've covered in my career, first at Forbes magazine and now at Wired, I've always been interested in online anonymity and the ways that this idea of like allowing people to hide their identity runs through these stories, the ways that people try to become someone else on the dark web, for instance, or sometimes as a journalist, show you who they truly are in secret. And in 2011, I guess this is quite a long time ago now, I came across what I believed to be at the time was the most interesting anonymity technology I'd ever seen, which was Bitcoin. It was described to me by like one of the first Bitcoin developers who was in direct contact with Satoshi Nakamoto, the mysterious creator of Bitcoin, as digital cash for the internet, not just in the sense that you could, use it to buy a cup of coffee, but that you could put unmarked bills in a briefcase and send them across the internet to anyone in the world without revealing your identity. And that, to me, being the kind of perverse reporter I am, was always looking for the dark side of technologies and unintended consequences. It seemed to me like that was going to unlock an entirely new world of online financial crime, like drug dealing and black markets and sale of classified secrets and human trafficking and God knows what. I mean, and then all of that came to pass over the next decade or so. But then something even less expected happened, which is, at least something I didn't expect, which is that I had this kind of slow motion epiphany by 2020 or so, that I was entirely wrong about Bitcoin, that it was, in fact, the opposite of untraceable. And it turned out that there had been this group of detectives who, over the previous years, starting in really like 2013, 2014, had realized that you could actually analyze the blockchain, this thing that underpinned the entire Bitcoin economy, first in the kind of academic research world, then in the tech industry, and finally in law enforcement, had learned to use the ability to trace cryptocurrency as this incredible investigative technique, and that they knew by the middle of the decade that they could actually follow the money with even more transparency and fidelity, with an even greater kind of financial forensic power than even in the traditional finance system. And they use this to kind of turn that anonymous criminal economy on its head. That Bitcoin had in fact served as a kind of trap for people seeking privacy of all kinds, including lots of criminals. And that this group of detectives had had used this investigative superpower to kind of go on a spree of busts and takedowns over years. And that is ultimately the story that I told in this book.
Yeah, and I think I mean you raise a really interesting point about kind of that selling the criminality dream. That idea that Bitcoin was completely untraceable, and the things that led to. But you used a great phrase in there actually about that kind of idea of chasing the money, because that's that's not a new thing, is it? In terms of the way that we have or criminal law enforcement organizations have gone around finding criminals. You talk in the book actually about kind of the comparison with the arrest of Al Capone, that actually Al Capone was eventually caught for tax evasion, forgetting all the other things he got up to. It was it was kind of following the money that captured him. So so what are, because throughout the book you've got some great stories about this kind of coming together, this kind of criminality that develops, and then this kind of set of tools that were developed, as you talked about, first academically, this set of tools that became useful in terms of tracking some of this crime and able to follow the money and able to solve some of these really dark activities that were kind of going on under the radar. So do you want to share a little bit with us, for people who are, just to give them a little bit of a taste of some of the things that you uncovered and some of the things you cover in the book?
Sure. Well, if I could just kind of like give a quick synopsis of the major cases in the book without too many spoilers, I hope. I mean, these are this book has been out for a little while now. I hope that people may have heard of these cases even, and I hope I can just give a little flavor of them. But the story begins with the Silk Road, which probably everybody has heard of, the first dark web drug market where people were buying and selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of narcotics with Bitcoin to, in fact, follow the money criminal investigations. And it seemed like it was working. I mean, people got away with these black market deals using cryptocurrency on the Silk Road for 2.5 years before it was taken down in 2013. And it was taken down, by the way, through kind of traditional online investigative techniques. The Dread Pirate Roberts, the creator of the Silk Road, had made some basic operational slip-ups that allowed the FBI to identify him as Ross Ulbricht, whose name we all know because he spent a decade in prison and then was just pardoned recently by the President Trump, who maybe that's a topic for another day, the wisdom of that decision. But it was actually only in the wake of the takedown of the Silk Road that Tigran Gambaryan, this IRS criminal investigator who would become kind of the central character in my book. And to your point, Paul, like IRS is the same. The IRS criminal investigations unit is the same one that took down Al Capone, last century. So it was Tigran, this IRS agent, who got on the trail of this mysterious outflow of money from the Silk Road. A few $100,000 worth of Bitcoins had flowed, he figured out, from the Silk Road to a DEA agent and a Secret Service agent who had been part of the investigation. They had claimed that those funds were just their personal investments, but Tigran, being a forensic accountant and looking at the blockchain and never quite believing in this purported anonymity of Bitcoin, he was able to show that he could follow that money across the blockchain, tracing it from address to address, directly from the Dread Pirate Roberts to the DEA agent, who it turned out had been acting as a mole inside the DEA, selling law enforcement information to the kingpin of a dark web drug site. And that when that DEA agent and the Secret Service agent, both these corrupt federal agents, went to prison, that was kind of the starting gun in this, this new cat and mouse game, this race, where law enforcement investigators realized, wow, this Bitcoin thing is the opposite of what it was promised to be. We can follow the money here with incredible fidelity. And Tigran, the IRS agent, and Chainalysis, the world's first cryptocurrency tracing startup, which launched around that time, then went looking for what other major cases can we crack with this new investigative technique. And very quickly, they looked to Mt. Gox, the first Bitcoin exchange that had been bankrupted by the theft of 650,000 Bitcoins, a kind of unfathomable number in today's terms, and traced those funds to show that they'd gone to a group of Russian cybercriminals, one of whom made the mistake of going on vacation in Greece and got arrested there. And actually was just traded in a prisoner exchange for an American detainee in Russia, another Trump White House move. So this keeps coming up, it seems like. But in the meantime, these cases just keep growing. I mean, the dark web drug trade had not ended with the demise of the Silk Road. It in fact left a kind of power vacuum that was eventually filled by this dark web drug site called Alphabay that at its peak in 2017 was 10 times the size of the Silk Road. And only through cryptocurrency tracing was the kingpin of that dark web drug site confirmed to be this Canadian guy, Alexander Cause, who was in Bangkok running this giant criminal empire. And he was arrested there, and the secret server of Alphabay was located in Lithuania through another secret crypto tracing technique that Tigran Gambarian helped to develop. They've still never revealed to me or revealed in public how that worked, but I think I figured it out and it's in the book. But I'll say a bit more, hopefully offer a few more details about that bust, which was very cinematic and cloak and dagger, but in a few moments. But the cases just continue to evolve. And the biggest of them all, I would say, is actually, an even darker layer of the dark web. Tigran Gambarian, in the wake of the Alphabay takedown, got a tip from Chainalysis about a site called Welcome to Video, which turned out to be a repository on the dark web. In fact, a market for child sexual abuse videos, what we used to call child porn. And through cryptocurrency tracing, he and his IRS colleagues could essentially follow every transaction that had gone into or come out of this online market for the most abhorrent materials you can imagine. And 337 men were identified and arrested around the world, dozens of countries. 23 children were rescued. I guess I am giving some spoilers here, but I want to give people a sense of the scale of this. I mean, I've never covered a case with this kind of human impact before or since. I don't have time to talk about every case here, but I'll just summarize some of the rest of them by saying that Tigran and his colleagues would go on to carry out the first, second, and third biggest seizures of money in any criminal investigation of any kind in the history of the U.S. Justice Department. Not just cryptocurrency, but any money of any kind. We're talking about billions of dollars in the cases that followed, and that is really why I felt like the scale of these stories called out for a book. But also, all of this game is not over. Cryptocurrency tracing absolutely remains an incredibly important technique in the pocket of so many of these federal investigators today, and this story continues.
Yeah, and I think we'll come back to that, because I think one of the things that really comes through in the book, and it was kind of thing that played in my head all the way through reading it, was this kind of difference potentially between privacy and anonymity, and what privacy and anonymity means, and what that might mean to the rest of us as well. And I think he gave some spoilers away, but actually, I think what's really fascinating when you read the book, and it's a genuinely compelling read, is just the scale of work that was involved to take down some of the things that you've spoken about. And actually that last case around Welcome to Video, and the way that occurred versus actually Alphabay and the Silk Road were very different, because actually the demographic of people involved in those were very different people. It was less, they were less digitally aware potentially of some of the risks and the way to cover their tracks. Thankfully less digitally aware, which felt it kind of made them it was a little bit easier to kind of drive buses, as we'd say in the UK, drive buses through the holes that they left. But what is fascinating is that often, while that kind of what came across was, that kind of lots of this feels like digital criminality, cryptocurrency, and looking at the dark web, and it's all very digital. It's fascinating all along in the way that it took real life and digital life colliding to capture all of the people involved in these kind of things. And you talked about kind of the Alphabay takedown and what that was like. One of the things that really stands out throughout the book is just how complicated this was, and just how orchestrated that takedown was. I mean, you mentioned you was going to share a little bit more on that. What else?
Yeah.
What else can you say?
Really, what I want to show here is how what's involved in capturing a dark web kingpin, even after cryptocurrency tracing has led investigators to their doorstep. How there is a kind of on the ground shoe leather part of this that is kind of incredibly impressive sometimes, and very involved. So by 2017, Alexander Cause had been confirmed, this Canadian man, to be the kingpin of Alphabay. And this massive law enforcement effort that spanned like 6 different agencies across different countries called Operation Bayonet had traced him to this house in the outskirts of Bangkok where he lived. But it turned out that Alexander Kaz had learned from the Silk Road in many respects, including that, Ross Ulbricht, the creator of the Silk Road, had been captured in a public library in San Francisco with his laptop open and unencrypted and logged into the Silk Road. FBI agents kind of staged the sting where they grabbed it out of his hands. And so Alexander Kaz had learned that not only do you need full disk encryption on your laptop to protect its secrets from investigators if they manage to grab your computer, but he also never opened his laptop that he used to administer Alphabet outside of this home, which created this incredibly difficult operational challenge that they would have to somehow grab his laptop open and unencrypted, logged into Alphabet in his home to really catch him red-handed, which is what they set out to do on July 5th of 2017. So on this block, in the outskirts of Bangkok, on that morning, there were no fewer than 9 undercover agents playing different roles. One was pretending to be an electrician working on a wiring box. Another was pretending to be a gardener trimming hedges. 2 more were pretending to shop for real estate in this house at the end of the block you might see. The car parked outside had their driver inside, who was another undercover agent, of course, pretending to be their chauffeur. And then there were, in fact, 2 more undercover agents who drove onto the block in this Toyota Camry, pretending to have taken a wrong turn. 2 young women in the Thai police force. And this is actually a still from the actual surveillance footage of this operation from a hidden camera posted outside that was being kind of sent across town to the Thai police headquarters. This is what they were watching. And when they gave the go-ahead for this operation to get the green light to the go-ahead, this gray Toyota Camry crashes into Alexander Kaz's front gate, as you see here. And in fact, this was meant to be a diversion to get him away from that laptop, to get him outside with the laptop hopefully still logged into Alphabet. It doesn't initially work. Instead, you can see that the window on the second floor opens. I'll show you that again. That's actually Kaz looking down at his gate. It's just been crashed literally by this car. But instead, his wife comes down, this young Thai woman, and she very kindly says to the undercover agent who was driving the car in the white T-shirt here, "Oh, please don't worry about the damage. It's no big deal." But the agent plays her role very well and says, "No, please, can you have your husband come down? I don't want this weighing on me. I'd like to talk to him about how to compensate him." So out comes Alexander Kaz here in the blue shorts, shoeless and shirtless. And the driver of the real estate shopping couple in the white shirt here, who was an undercover agent too, of course, steps out and kind of seems to like mess with the gate with him, like trying to act like he's being helpful. But then he takes Kaz by the shoulder and I think says he wants to speak to him for a moment. I think this actually just confuses Kaz, and because of the language barrier. And at that moment, another undercover agent who goes by the nickname M in the black T-shirt you might see here on the left, he comes out where he was hiding in the back seats of the car for the real estate shopping couple. And just as he is walking by Kaz now sees coming directly toward him, running at him, the electrician, now revealed to be a police officer in a Thai police vest, sprinting at him to take him down, to actually grab him. Now Kaz finally understands what's happening here. He knows, like everybody else here, he's thinking about that laptop. He knows he needs to get inside to close it, just to slam it shut, to engage its full disk encryption at the very least. He spins around. He's in fight or flight mode now. One agent grabs him and then another, and he wrestles with them. But then M in the black T-shirt breaks free because he knows that he has a very specific mission. He runs through the front door of the house, up the steps, taking them 2 at a time. He's practiced this on a house with a similar layout elsewhere in the neighborhood. He bursts into what he thinks is the home office at the top of the stairs. It turns out to be a guest bedroom where 2 Canadian house guests are asleep, and he apologizes for waking them up, and then spins around, runs across the hallway into Kaz's bedroom, where he finds Kaz's laptop here, open, unencrypted, and logged into Alphabet. Exactly as they planned, he leaps across the room, puts his hand on the trackpad to keep it alive, and radios to the team that he has the laptop. This is truly how the biggest dark web market in history was taken down, through this kind of legwork on the ground.
It comes out throughout the book, kind of the complexity of dealing with this, the complexity of the challenge. I mean, there's a whole piece about his mobile phone that gets talked about in the book in there, and the importance of capturing that device as well. We'll leave that for when people read the book later to kind of understand how that was done and the effort that went into that. Because that's a great little nugget all of its own. And there's so much I'd love to kind of go into in more detail, but we've only got limited time here. So, we talked about kind of how cryptocurrency, not just Bitcoin and way beyond Bitcoin, but how cryptocurrency has kind of fueled a lot of this. And we talked about how kind of the ability to analyze the blockchain has allowed for law enforcement and and whoever thought accountancy was going to be cool until you read this book, you realize how cool accountants are. That whole process, finding that, you'd almost think, well, surely cyber criminals can't continue to use cryptocurrency to carry out cyber crime. But the thing you talk about towards the end of the book, and something we've had the opportunity to speak about previously while we prepared for this conversation, was actually it's almost the opposite of that. That actually cryptocurrency is right at the heart of of the crime that we see day to day, and because one of the things when you read the book, these kind of fantastical and thrilling thrilling takedowns of these massive criminal organizations, etc. But of course it has a real day-to-day impact on me, you, and probably everybody watching these sessions today. So how's cryptocurrency kind of funding what we see today as a key part of what we're seeing on our day-to-day lives as cybersecurity professionals?
Right. I mean, I think that the first question I always get asked about this book is like, so Andy, you've described this golden age of cryptocurrency tracing and how it's this incredible secret weapon for law enforcement. So why is it that ransomware and pig butchering, the crypto scammers, typically run by Chinese organized crime groups, and North Korean hackers all use cryptocurrency or steal it in the last of those cases, as this kind of massive form of crime. And I think, in fact, pig butchering of all of them is probably the biggest. We are seeing, in fact, tens of billions of dollars stolen every year from people in the West by very often forced laborers inside of Southeast Asian scam compounds all around, the Golden Triangle region of Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos. That has all grown enormously since my book came out. And I think it speaks to the point that you can actually identify the perpetrators of these crimes with incredible accuracy and resolution, thanks to the blockchain very often. But if they're beyond the reach of Western law enforcement, if they're in non-extradition countries, if they're in Russia, where Putin, I think, has very purposefully protected them and allowed them to wreak havoc on American infrastructure through ransomware, or the Golden Triangle, this region that is truly a lawless zone, that China and Southeast Asian countries have allowed to flourish, or North Korea, which is just a complete rogue state, then the perpetrators can still be beyond your reach. You might know their names, but like identifiability and accountability are not the same thing. Sadly, I do think that crypto tracing remains a huge part of the investigations of these three different kinds of criminal epidemics. And with ransomware in particular, I think we have seen actually a big drop. We saw a giant drop last year in the total profits collected through ransomware, through extortion payments. And that's in part because federal investigators in the US disrupted, not always like by laying hands on anybody, but by arresting anyone, because they're all in Russia typically, but often by seizing websites, seizing crypto, disrupting operations, some of these ransomware gangs. And that actually did take a huge chunk out of their revenue last year. So I think it's part of the solution. I think too that, if our government in the US, I wish we would take pig butchering more seriously. I don't think any law enforcement in the US has actually focused on this enough. Then it would be very possible to find and identify and hold accountable some of the Chinese mob bosses, essentially, who are running these scam compounds. Yet we've only seen very limited sanctions and practically no attempts at arresting these people. So I think that it is, it's not the entire solution, sadly, but I think it can be a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of whole thing about having to be there has to be an element of reality. You can't, while you might be able to trace criminals in this way digitally, ultimately there's got to be real law enforcement, real people, a real kind of intersection between the digital world and the real world to kind of capture these people, so and it's a really interesting pivot, and we've kind of run out of time, because I did want to delve into this, but this is something for the book, I think, and for people to kind of consider as they look at it later. I think it's a really interesting piece towards the end of the book that kind of talks about chain analysis and the ability to analyze a blockchain. Seems a hero throughout most of the story, but actually you raise some really interesting questions about the importance of privacy and whether we can have privacy and why privacy is under threat. So I think it's a really interesting ending to the book as well, that people will be able to look into. But Andy, look, unfortunately we've kind of run out of time, but it's been a fascinating chat. The book that say that people are going to get a copy of as we wrap up the event here is a fantastic read. So congratulations on that. It's a great read. I look forward to your next one, whatever that's going to be about. But Andy, look, really appreciate your time today, and thanks for being with us, and thanks for sharing some of the stories from Traces in the Dark.
Well, thank you, Paul. And thank you, Bitwarden, for this conversation. It's been really cool. Appreciate it.